The three corners, putting Maddox in the mix as the slot guy, and the two safeties, Epps and Gardner-Johnson. They played as well as they did last night without a whole lot of pressure in front of them. It is an undefeated Monday. You want to know something? Not really getting tired of saying that. How you doing, everybody? After a tremendous weekend for Philadelphia sports fans, capped off by a clutch win against their main rival, the Dallas Cowboys, on Sunday night. We're here to talk Birds football here on Birds 365. John McMullen and Jody McDonald. J-Mac was glad to hear I got the energy this morning because, yes, I was in bed by slightly after midnight. McMullen not so lucky because he had to wrap up all his post-game duties and get his writings in before he got up early for me. How many cups of coffee, Jamie? Oh, you don't do coffee in the morning before the show?
Well, I had to today. I got one right here. Okay. You have to. Sometimes, Typically, I don't. Typically, I go water. I try to hydrate. But, these night games, you got to go coffee.
Understood. But
so
it was
the boys might go at some point.
It was a good night game last night. Once again, the Eagles were not perfect, but they were good enough, and they stuck it to a division rival who came in only one game behind. Kind of surprising that Cooper Rush was able to do what he did for the 4 games that he started in place of Dak Prescott. But Cooper Rush kind of came back down to earth last night with not
Cinderella.
A very good game.
Midnight clock striking midnight.
The old turn into a pumpkin thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. He's done a wonderful job, but he's limited. And I think you saw that against a good football team. The Eagles were able to take advantage. I think they had 12 pass breakups. I mean, they were all over them. And they knew they could jump certain things. And, there's going to be people complaining about no sacks and giving up the lead. And I was a little surprised I thought the game was over at 20-0 because, I talked about it all week. That's exactly what the Eagles wanted. They wanted Cooper Rush playing from behind because he just doesn't have it from a standpoint of being able to come back in a game like that. But I give, very similar to Detroit, I give Mike McCarthy credit. He did not abandon the running game. And I think that was where the Eagles struggled. Ezekiel Elliott looked like Ezekiel Elliott 3-4 years ago. He looked really, really good. Tony Pollard can run the football well. Also, so, they struggled a little bit in the second half, stopping the run, and that opened up a few things for Cooper Rush. But overall, the secondary was tremendous. I mean, they were James Bradbury, our buddy Bob Groats. Yeah, we were sticking it to him every time. Yeah, and he's had a tremendous year as a whole. Obviously, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, big plays. Marcus Epps had a shot at a couple. He played really well. Darius Slay is Darius Slay, that. Secondary was tremendous. They were the star of the game to me.
Absolutely right. That's the first thing on my list of notes. How good the Eagles secondary was. You'd almost call them the Fab Five. I know we're turning back the clock. I don't know if they wear their shorts down low like the youngsters at Michigan did a couple decades ago, but the three corners, putting Maddox in the mix as the slot guy, and the two safeties, Epps and Gardner-Johnson. They played as well as they did last night without a whole lot of pressure in front of them. We talk about it all the time. Does the offensive line make the secondary job easier? Does the secondary make the offensive line's job easier? That split second either way can often dictate things. Last night was all on the coverage. That there wasn't a whole hell of a lot of pressure on Cooper Rush. There were no, you're Mr. Hurry and Mr. Pressure, I'm Mr. Sack. They weren't getting either. They weren't getting sacks. They weren't getting pressured. They weren't getting hurries. And the other thing the Cowboys weren't doing was getting any first downs. Because the defense was playing as well as they were on the back end, the coverage was phenomenal. And Jonathan Gannon showed some faith in those guys. I saw a stat this morning, upwards of almost 40% man-to-man. The Eagles never play 40% man-to-man. They sit in that zone for the great majority of the year. That shows you how much confidence the defensive coordinator had in his secondary, the we're just going to take on these Dallas wide receivers. CD Lamb, overrated, included on man-to-man. We don't need to.
By the way, yeah, I'm very disappointed in CD Lamb. Very disappointed. I thought he was really on the verge of becoming a really good receiver. It's just not, way too many drops, way too much inconsistency. You're right. They didn't have a great pass rushing day, but you talk about, to me, it's the chicken and the egg. Did Jonathan Gannon show confidence in his secondary, or he knew the quarterback was, had some issues? So that to me probably leaned more towards the quarterback than, hey, we're gonna put it on the shoulders of the secondary. But either way, it doesn't matter. That's what I like about this coaching staff. They look at the opposition, they say, all right, they're weak here, they're weak there. I can take advantage of Cooper Rush. We'll play more. We'll play less zone, and we'll do things that way. And Brandon Graham late, the third interception was all on Brandon Graham.
That's
the
true.
Hurry. And CD was open. Now, he probably would have dropped it if he had the ability to get the ball out there, but he was wide open. Brandon Graham made that play. So it is, Gannon says it all the time, rush and coverage and rush. It is sort of a marriage, but yeah, definitely the secondary played better than the front yesterday. And I think they only had 4 hurries. Obviously, Brandon had one of them. Hassan Reddick had 2, but he didn't.
Can I ask quick?
Yeah.
Did Josh Sweat play?
Yeah, Josh Sweat didn't have one of his better games. He's having a good year, though, overall. Yeah, it's Cowboys are a good team. I'm a little surprised their offensive line held up as well as it did. They've had so many issues. Now, Zach Martin, I'm not surprised, but and even Steele, who plays next, Terrence Steele, is having a good season. The left side, I'm surprised, held up as well as they did. But, it's the Eagles played well, and they're 6-0 for only the third time in franchise history, Jody, and the first time in nearly 20 years. So things are going well for the Eagles.
That is pretty impressive. And the other thing I like most, the way the secondary covered and games out of, I would say, and I text you because he was playing as well as he did, although he didn't get one of the 3 picks. I actually thought Bradbury was the best of a tremendous lot back there. CJ Johnson came up with the 2 picks. Slay got one that was kind of thrown right to him, but Bradbury had a couple of great breakups, including the one that looked like he gave up a touchdown and they rightfully overturned because the wide receiver never got his second foot in. That was because of dynamite coverage by Bradbury. The secondary just wowed me with their level of play last night. And the other thing that I thought was necessary and just flat out clutch for the Eagles was the Cowboys cut it to 20-17. You thought you were going to be able to write your story ahead of time when it was 20-0, already start to formulate the narrative. Here comes the second half. Here comes a late kickoff at the end of the first half. Jesus. They gotta improve.
Yeah, special teams every week.
Mackerel.
Every week is something.
Let the guy go right up the middle for 60 yards. But we'll put that aside. We'll get back to that. Cowboys come back, get the touchdown, cut it to 17. Once again, Eagles 20-point second quarter, but scoring in other quarters not nearly as easy when they needed it, when they had to have it. In the fourth quarter, here comes the ability to run the football. I jotted them down real quickly in order. Sanders for 13, Sanders for 5, Sanders for 1, Jalen for 5, Boston Scott hopping in, going for 5, short pass to Sanders. So if you're going to throw it to somebody out of the backfield for 1. Gainwell for 5, Gainwell for 6, Hurts for 3, Hurts for 2, Miles Sanders for no gain before. All right, now we've kind of softened them up. They think we're going to run the football since we've run it right down their throats all the way down the field while the clock is ticking away. AJ for 22 and Devontae on the touchdown. The drive was a thing of beauty. You couldn't do it any better than the Eagles did. They once again, same as they did last week against Arizona, when the game got tight, when it was hanging in the balance, we're going to go back to doing what we do best. Last year, 2-5, they made the conscious decision. We run the football better than we pass the football. The owner may like to pass the football. The rest of the league may be overpassing the football. We know what we can do best with this offensive line. And oh, by the way, 2 key pieces on the offensive line not even in there. The Eagles ran it right down the Cowboys' throat and walked away with a touchdown. Last week, they had to settle for the field goal. This week came away with a touchdown. At their core, at least on the offensive side, the Philadelphia Eagles can run the football as well as anybody in the National Football League.
Oh, yeah. And most of that has to do, I shouldn't say most of it, because a lot of it has to do with the offensive line. By the way, Jordan Mailata, shout out to him. Not only did he last the entire game, but he, when he gets to introduce himself, he said Jeff Stoutland University, which I thought was tremendous. Obviously, he didn't go to typical American football college, but so I thought I got a kick out of that.
Very
I was
cool.
talking to him about that in the locker room. But you're right, third game and Detroit, week 1. Remember, they just drained the clock. So what they're able to do when everybody in the building knows what they want to do, that tells me more than anything else that they're a good football team. Now, you can nitpick, and I understand 20-0 turned into 20-17, and people are going to say that and say, why don't they go to this sooner? Jalen Hurts talks about this nebulous standard all the time, which is essentially perfection, and you can't be perfect. I mean, in the NBA, Jody, everybody, you always make a run in the NBA. Well, the NFL is almost becoming the NBA. I mean, everybody makes a run normally. You have a couple blowouts here and there, and the Eagles have had a couple blowouts as the best team in football. But normally somebody makes a run, and we see it all the time. With you're up 14 points in the fourth quarter in these games, and all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, you're losing. It happens so quickly in the modern NFL. So some of that's baked in, but it is interesting that, when they sort of feel a little bit of urgency, they go right to the run game and the offensive line and Jalen Hurts. And it's been tremendous. And as you mentioned, Lane Johnson's not in the game, and Jack Driscoll, bless his heart, was getting killed by Micah Parsons in pass protections. And that was my concern about him playing left tackle if he had to play left tackle. And you saw it at right tackle. But he can go straight ahead, man. And Suo wasn't in there that long, but he had to come in for Landon Dickerson. He had to go straight ahead. He can go straight ahead. He struggles in pass protection. They've done this 3 times now. And 7:37, they took off the clock, 13 plays, 75 yards. And you mentioned you ran down all of them. The Miles Sanders pass was essentially a little shovel. So they ran it 11 consecutive times, essentially, before they finished it off. And the play to A.J. Brown, he was so open because of those 11 plays. And you're right, they're all selling out. You saw them sell out on the quarterback sneak a couple times. They can't stop it. They can sell out all they want. They can't stop it. And then Devontae Smith wide open in the end zone. And so it's interesting, but here's why I'm not a stats guy. Well, version number 1276, why I'm not a stat guy in the NFL. Big stat guy in baseball, but not in the NFL. Everybody was complaining, not everybody, but a few people. Well, Jalen Hurts never has passing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts never has passing touchdowns. What is his worst passing game of the season? But he had passing touchdowns. So
passes.
You're going to be happy about it. So who cares? You get in, you get in.
Exactly right. They mixed it up when they had to last night. Tremendous on the defensive back end. And a win over Dallas. And a couple of the guys in the locker room talked about it last night, including a guy like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who hasn't been here all that long. A rivalry win's a rivalry win. And it's much bigger on the college level, but it is existent in the pro level. and I know you and I are guys who deal with the fans and them all the time and at the games and on the telephone lines. It matters. The fans who go down there and support the Eagles, and I was at Game 4 of the Game 3 of the playoffs for the Phillies this week in Citizens Bank Park, was just as loud as I've ever heard it. Last night, you were at Lincoln Financial Field. It was loud, a loud crowd helping out, making it more difficult. That was, at least my estimation, part of the reason why Cooper Rush struggled. He couldn't get all his calls in the way he wanted. Yeah, you want to win these kind of games because it helps you bring your crowd every single game. And yeah, it bolsters the confidence. I don't think confidence is a problem with this team, but it never hurts to add to it. And that seemed like a pretty confident bunch last night after the game, Johnny Mac.
Oh, yeah. Why shouldn't they be? Nick Sirianni was coming off the field saying, how about them Eagles going back? Yeah, they care, especially Nick. Nick's a fiery guy. But, the Jalen Hurts was asked about the rivalry aspect. But bottom line, you mentioned college. You saw it with Alabama and Tennessee. That's what makes college football great, not the product. It's the atmosphere. You can't duplicate that. And somebody asked, Jalen's seen it at Alabama, he's seen it at Oklahoma. So he said he joked at Alabama against everybody because, it's like a national catastrophe. They lost. For Tennessee, it's the biggest day in the history of the world. And Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma, Okie State. You can't match that from an environment standpoint. But obviously, it's very important for the fan base. And the Eagles should have won this game, expected to win this game. They won the game. I don't think it was that big of a deal for certain players. Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, who always said, I love AJ.
Jalen was 0-2 against Cowboys.
Yeah. And he said, from that standpoint, from a personal standpoint, he wanted to play well. But I just mean it from the angst. Like, the fan base doesn't like the Cowboys. Like, I don't think a lot of that is in the locker room. I don't think there's certain guys, Jason Kelsey, but even Jason will say, it's week 6. As a matter of fact, he said that. It's week 6 of the regular season. Nick Sirianni made the short, and only counts for one. I don't. It's not Alabama, Tennessee.
Yeah, I think some of the Eagle players were being gracious winners last night. You're 5-0, they're 4-1. Yeah, week 6, but it's 4-0 against 5-1.
Well, it's a big win. It's a division
lost
win.
9 out of your last 11 to Dallas, and there's certain guys in there who've never played Dallas before, so they don't care about any of the previous games. Yeah. Oh, ask Kelsey and Lane Brown and those guys who have been there, losing 7 of the last 9 against the Dallas Cowboys. I'm not buying it's just another game, Johnny Mac. Sorry.
Well, I'm not saying it. It's a division game. So, if the Giants keep winning, God bless them. But if they keep winning, that game's going to be every bit as big, that first game with the Giants. Now, I don't think ultimately they're going to keep winning at that level. But if by some chance they do, well, all of a sudden that becomes an even bigger game. I'm just comparing it to college because I happen to watch the end of the Alabama-Tennessee game. Nothing in the NFL is like that. That's my only point from an atmosphere standpoint.
By the way, and this has become rather irrelevant because Jalen Hurts is playing the way he's playing, and he's going to be the Eagles quarterback going forward if they can get a contract done with him. You and I, all off season, we're talking about if they go to the draft, the Eagles got draft capital. Hendon Hooker. None of the draft guys we have on. My buddy Rick Saratello comes up after us either. I think he might have had him in the top 10, one of very few. At the bottom of the top 10, maybe like 9th or 10th, best quarterback prospect. He was every bit as good as Mr. Young on Saturday. I know he's a 5th-year senior, but oh my God, did he put on a show. That's why us trying to evaluate quarterbacks 11 months in advance of a draft is kind of a ridiculous procedure because guys completely changed the narrative with their final year, and Hooker is doing just that for Tennessee. All right, McMullen and McDonald, the Mac guys on Bird 365. Let's add to the mix Our buddy Paul Domwich said he would be good enough to get up early for us and talk about an Eagles win, which he wasn't sure was going to happen. Paul Domwich next here on Birds 365.